what is a trellis? Do you have one? Because fruitfulness doesn't happen by accident. We're out here in the beautiful Adelaide Hills, which is famous for their vineyards. We're preparing for our discipleship mobilization intensive. We had an amazing session last year in this very vineyard. And in John chapter 15, Jesus talks about the metaphor of the vine and the branches. He says that he is the vine and that his disciples are the branches. He says that outside of the connectedness to the vine, that they can do nothing. What is interesting about that metaphor is he could have used quite a few other metaphors, agricultural or relational, to demonstrate the importance of reliance. He could have used the father with the son, a sheep with a shepherd. He could have used a tree and the rain, but instead he used a more purposeful and potent illustration of the vine and the branches. Now, a sheep can exist for periods of time without the shepherd, a tree without the rain for a period of time, but the vine cannot exist without, the branches cannot exist without the vine. And I used to think that abiding in him was just simply a devotional time. But this vine here, these branches are completely unable to be able to bear fruit. They don't just go in and out, they are constantly connected. And I believe that that is the picture that Jesus is illustrating of the invitation for ongoing connectedness with Christ. Honestly, it has been a complete and total game changer in my life, thinking through that lens and pursuing a life of connectedness with Jesus. So John chapter 15, the metaphor demonstrates that the importance of abiding, which is connectedness to Jesus and obedience. And so we need to ask the question, what are the things that will hinder fruitfulness in our life? And I think that we see, if we put the parable of the sower alongside the metaphor of John chapter 15, that we will see what produces the ground for fruitfulness and what will prevent us from fruitfulness. In the parable of the sower, we see the third soil that is crowded out by the thorns of life, the lure of wealth, the desire for other things, and the cares of this world. So again, thinking about connectedness, the distractions, the interruptions, the things that muddy the water, are the things that are going to prevent us from fruitfulness. You know, the early church really understood this. In the first few centuries, there was significant persecution, which we could argue that was helpful as a trellis to be able to remove those distractions in people's lives. But around 300 AD, when Rome became a so-called Christian nation, that the persecution was removed, and as a result, apathy began to come in, and so many Christians became fruitless. There's a group of people called the Desert Fathers that recognized this, and they began to develop what they called a rule of life. And they likened it to the trellis. You see, if the vine is just left to its own devices, it will fall on the ground, it will become fruitless, it will probably be trampled upon, it's not going to get as much sunlight or nutrients, or become disconnected from the vine. And so they continued the picture of this, of John chapter 15, and they say what we need is a trellis, a rule of life that will prevent us from fruitlessness. In the midst of complacency and apathy, we need to have intentional rhythms. These rhythms will not produce spiritual growth in themselves, but will help prevent us from the thorns in this world that will create distractions. So we're talking fasting, prayer rhythms, silence and solitude, pausing throughout the day to be able to realign their thoughts, Sabbath, rest. All of these different things help the vine be able to come into a place of maximum fruitfulness. And I believe that that's something that I've really been learning about. And there's so many areas that have been distractions that have prevented me from fruitfulness. But I think that we need to recapture the ancient church's practice of implementing a rule of life so that we can maximize fruitfulness in our lives.